The stream is live. Okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Because Vince has connection problems, I'm going to read the introduction to you. Normally speaking, he's the moderator, and now I will just read his introductory text, and then I will explain the slide that you can see. And my dear colleague Andrea will further explain the process, what we're going to do. Okay, so in today's session, it's my pleasure to welcome back Dr. Andrea Martinez-Celis and Vincent Merk, both by their practice of the discipline, and we will outline a typical session structure and deliver an impromptu session as a demonstration. Andrea and Vincent, welcome back. Andrea, you have kindly volunteered to facilitate today's session, so over to you. Before I do that, I will just explain the slide that I've put here. This is to explain in a way the general context of what the UNESCO Story Circle is about. So you can see the general context, the importance of developing intercultural competence as an open dialogue, and why is that so important? The purpose is to indeed put intercultural competence as crucial for managing conflict and fostering peace in a diverse world. So that's the first purpose of running, of facilitating story circle circle workshop around the world. The second purpose is because of the rise of populism, migration crisis, violence, extremism, which highlight the need for enhanced intercultural dialogue. This need for intercultural dialogue is very important that we all feel. And finally, it's also for developing intercultural competence, because they are seen as essential for individuals to live and work together peacefully. So these are three main aspects of the general context of the UNESCO Story Circle. The methodology in a nutshell: it's a transformative approach to developing intercultural competencies. So through structured sharing of personal experiences. So we will see that indeed, as we will, Andrea and I, run the show in a minute to show you how a practical example how this can be done with certain modifications. Participants would usually engage in small groups discussion and share personal stories. This is a very important aspect here. And we will also do that to demonstrate the process. The methodology emphasizes emotional connections, clearly, because you're telling personal stories that you have a clear emotional connection to one another that is developed. And it can be very impactful, probably more than in a traditional training. The idea is to put people in circles and that share stories. And finally, the age is designed for people of, let's say, 12 to 70 plus. So this is something that is worldwide possible in terms of age, and it typically runs in a time slot of an hour to an hour and a half, 20, depending on how big the circle is. So now, Andrea, I will leave it to you, and Andrea will explain how we're going to run the show, so to say, in staging up a story circle workshop. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Thank you, Vince, for the invitation. Again, it's a pleasure to be here again. And as Vincent mentioned, as we were both of us interviewed a few months ago, we wanted to do it this way in a practical way, because when people want to develop this methodology in their classes or trainings or whatever, they are always asking for examples. And it's not a good idea to do it in the same moment, because then, we are biased. But then for practitioners, for those who want to put this into practice, I think that's going to be a good example. So they may answer questions you may have. I've taken some notes, because if not, I know myself and I will speak for more than 3 minutes. But Okay, let me share my screen. First of all, I'm sorry for my voice. I'm a little hoarse today. But basically, if you remember from our interviews, we had 3 minutes to share stories who are guided by specific questions, which I will share right now. Yeah, is uploading. Yeah, so you will see the question on the screen, and Vincent and me will answer with our own stories just to give you examples of how it works. Yes, here it goes. So if you remember from the other interviews and from the guidelines you have also online, after each story, we have 15 seconds to what we call flashback round to give, let me see how it works, if I use it here. Yeah, here. Okay. So just to take one word, one sentence from the other person's story. In this case, we have just 2 people. The minimum is 4. Okay, but in this way, we are gonna do it in a different, adapted way. Also quicker, because normally it's like 1 hour and a half, and we have like 30 minutes approximately. And the idea is to have to give you a sample. So let's start with the first question, which we call the first Get Acquainted round, in which we ask the group of people. Well, first, sorry, I didn't mention, I think this neither mention, but we have like the role of facilitator. Okay, normally the facilitator doesn't participate. It's out of the room or the breakout room or whatever. But let me mention that in this case, we are both like participants and facilitators. And important to mention also that when we do it online, it is very important to have our camera on during the whole session, okay? Because non-verbal language is very important, facial expressions, and so on, okay? So one of the things we agree before taking these sessions is to be with the camera on and stay for the 1 hour and a half or 2 hours session. Okay, so having said that, let's start with this first question to share our own stories and to know each other a bit more. The first one is, please tell us your given name and the story behind it. How did you come to have this name? Who chose it? These kind of questions. Vincent, do you want to start with
Yeah.
your?
Well, the first question there, obvious, who chose it? My parents, clearly. That's, I think, the obvious answer. My name is Vincent. Yeah, Vincent comes from vincere in Latin, which means the winner. So I don't know how predisposed this is, but yeah, I like the name because it refers to Latin, our Latin roots. Okay, that's always, I think, interesting in Europe, and it's all international. It exists in many languages with different pronunciation, but basically, it is. I was born Vincent as a French young man, French baby, but it also applies or goes in other languages. Vincent, Vincent in German or in Dutch. So I think it's Vicente in Espanol, claro, Vincenzo in Italiano, etc. So it's yeah, I like it because it's international enough, and there are a few famous Vincents in the world. So I'm happy about it. Yeah, thank you. Over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Vincent. Very interesting. Well, as you know, my name is Andrea. That's how I pronounce in Spanish. And the story behind my name is much a product of its time, basically. It's a little piece of the 90s pop culture, really. Well, when my mother was pregnant, she was, like much of the world at that time, completely hooked on the TV show Beverly Hills, if you remember. So she would watch it religiously every week. And while many were fans of Brenda or Kelly, my mother's favorite character was by far Andrea Zuckerman. And for those who remember the show, she was the smart one, the ambitious editor of the school newspaper, I think. I'm not wrong. So she was incredibly intelligent, driven. He has a strong moral as well, comparing to the rest of characters. So my mom really admired those qualities. She loved the character, that she was so determined and valued her education above everything else, if you remember. So she saw Andrea here as a great role model. So she decided that if she had a daughter, she would name her Andrea. However, there was another very different option on the table. As my family is Spanish, as you may know, have these Spanish roots, and the other contender was Rocío, which is a very traditional, let's call very Spanish name, full of weight and this history, this heritage. So my parents had this debate going on for months. Could it be Andrea, the modern American sounding name inspired by Beverly Hills, or Rocío, which is very traditional? In the end, the deciding factor was nothing to do with tradition or culture, but it came down to something very superficial, which was my hair. I was born very, very blonde, very, very blonde. And according to the story my parents love to tell, they took one look at me at the hospital with my little blonde hair, and my dad said to my mom, she doesn't look like Rocío. They felt the name, which, as I mentioned, is associated with the Spanish tradition, is like dark haired, like the typical Spanish that you may have in mind. So I was not at that moment. So finally, I was called after this ambitious journalist from Beverly Hills, and I love it. I'm glad. I always found it funny, and I love them, like the 90s and of this all of this pop culture. So yeah, basically, I think it connects a lot with my my mother's life. That 90s culture, more than Spanish culture, but finally 90s Western culture. Let's call it. And that's all. Thank you, Vincent. Now let's have this flashback moment. So
Okay.
I may start because you started, right? From Vincent story, I would choose the word winner. That's the perfect definition. Also because I admire Vincent so much. So I think it's a great name and the very appropriate name for you, Vincent. Thank you for sharing.
Muchas gracias, Andreas. Yeah, for you, I think the amazing story about your name, what is really stayed as memorable with this change, the flexibility that you had, the role of your mother first, this mix of tradition and then of reality. If you had maybe had black hair, you would have been called Melania, which is black in Greek. So maybe amazing how your parents were flexible and changed, adapted to a reality. I think it's a very interesting story on how to create a name and a personality behind that. Certainly, somehow, yeah, amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to be a journalist when I was a child. So
Yeah.
maybe, I studied things related to journalism. So maybe, yeah. Okay, perfect. I'm just reading Vince in the chat. As he mentioned, Saint Vincent of Zaragoza, I guess. Yeah, there's many charities from San Vincent de Paul. Yeah, that's true. And yeah, El Rocío means frost. Absolutely. Yeah, I like frost. I think it would be the best word to define it. Yeah.
And I was indeed named after Saint Vincent de Paul, was the patron for my parents. Yeah. With someone who was very generous and helped the poor. So maybe I have something of that too. Yeah. As a
Absolutely.
predestination.
Yeah. Yeah, and smart as well. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, perfect. Let's move on then to the second round.
Hmm.
About intercultural competencies are ready. And this is one of my favorite questions. What is your earliest memory of difference? That is, when did you first notice or realize that you were different from someone else? Not just because of culture, but also because of faith, religion, gender, socioeconomic status, of course, culture as well. But, any factor that may be a sign of difference. Again, Vincent, if you want to start.
Hmm. Well, I think my first real experience that I really discovered that there were differences is going to the United States as an exchange high school boy when I was 18. I had finished my education in France, my baccalaureate. I grew up in a typically, well, a French Alsatian in Strasbourg family, open-minded but still very French. So everything around me was very French. Although in Alsace, of course, we also have this Germanic, Alemannic heritage. So I grew up certainly in noticing differences, but still it was in a very French environment, so French speaking as well. So for me, the first trigger in a way that the things were very different was when I was going to the United States to spend a year there with AFS, an organization, and I spent a year in a host family in the US, and that was for me clearly an eye opener. This shaped the rest of my life. That I thought, this is very interesting, living in a foreign culture country with other people, etc., etc. So this was the real trigger. So that's I realized that life was not only about monocultural things, certainly not, and that shaped up my need, my say the need to experience further in my life, experience intercultural differences, deal with that as an autodidact first, because at the time you could not study anything like intercultural management. So I was very much an autodidact, and then I continued by being going to the Netherlands, then with a scholarship, and that was the continuation of that. But the trigger is about is really my stay of 1 year stay in a U.S. American family. Yeah, clearly.
Thank you, Vincent. Very, very interesting. Um, okay, I was thinking of the word. Let's first share my own story. In my case, my first memory of difference, it's when I was very, very, very young, like 3 years old. Well, let's start by the beginning. Basically, my best friend when I was a child was from Morocco. So we were very good friends from since we met him, and we were like I don't know 1 year old, let's say, or so. So before I was 3 years old, my entire world was my family and my best friend. She was named Randa. That was
Hmm.
his name. We were inseparable. I mean, we played together every single day. I was a single child at that time, so that's also why, and she as well. As I mentioned, her family was from Morocco. She was also born in Morocco, but she moved to Spain when she was a baby. But Morocco to me was like just a word. I mean, a sound to my 3-year-old mind. Um, Morocco had no more weight or meaning than the name of the next town or a place I had not visited yet. So the concept of different countries, let alone different continents, was completely beyond my comprehension. I was as child. So she was not my Moroccan friend at all. I mean, she was Randa, my best friend. We shared the same toys. We laughed at the same silly things as children. We perfectly understood each other. There was absolutely no sense of difference between us. We were simply two little girls, and that's all. Then we started school together. And that first week, I remember feeling so excited. Also a bit overwhelmed because, as I mentioned, I was an only child, so I wasn't used to be surrounded by other children all the time, new faces. And then I started to hear other children saying things like comments directed at Rwanda. They were just 3-year-old kids, so they were probably just repeating ugly things that they had heard from adults at home. But the words were still sharp. They were about her skin color, about her being from somewhere else, let's call it. I remember standing there holding her hand and feeling this profound sense of confusion. I didn't fully understand the words they were using. I mean, they were obviously racist comments, but I understood the tone. I knew it was something negative. And the crudely. I saw the confusion and the heart of my friend's face, of Randa's face. I perfectly remember that moment. And, I was very, very young. And, that was the moment. I mean, it wasn't a realization that Randa was different from me. It was the shocking, painful realization of the other people that saw her as different. So the difference wasn't something that I had perceived before. It was something that was projected onto her, basically, or onto us as well, by the outside world, basically. So it was my first lesson. That difference wasn't something you feel inside, but something that is often unfairly imposed upon us, basically, by others, by society, by history, by whatever. So it was brutal and very saddened to the simple innocence that, as we were very young. But yeah, that was my very first memory of difference.
Yeah, interesting that. Well, let me just keep the comment for later. Yeah, when we have that as a structure. Maybe I can read now Vince's contribution here, which is also interesting because it's not intercultural. But let me just read it first before I comment on that. When I went to secondary grammar school, I was invited to a new friend's house. It was big, expensive, with large gardens. His dad was a doctor. His mother was a chef. His world was very different from mine. Completely different aspirations and experiences from me, certainly. So I think this is interesting as well, and I think we will just comment when it's time for that. The next prompt flashback. Yeah, so I'll let you organize that, Andrea, again.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, very, very interesting. Thank you, Vince. Okay, let's. Yeah, young children don't understand geography. That's true. The word is home, family. The concept of nations doesn't compute. Absolutely, yeah, that's true. Even of skin colors or physical things, because physically we were different, but we didn't care about it. I mean, as I mentioned, I was very blonde when I was a child, and she was not. And I mean, I felt her as a sister. I mean, Anyway, thank you so much for sharing. Let's take this flashback time from Vincent story. I was really into the concept of French environment that you mentioned, because I think that's something that has changed a lot with time, and now we have more Western, let's call it. I hate that concept, but it's true somehow, perspective. So maybe nowadays is different, or I feel it as different from when I was younger to now. That if you travel through or around the Western world, it's kind of similar. I mean, in the past you could see very or obvious differences, but now when I think of that French environment, stereotypes come to my mind. That's the only thing. Yeah. So I know it's flashback. I mean, we may discuss this later.
15 seconds.
This French environment, what we have in mind when we think of French environment. What comes to your mind, to the audience mind?
Yeah. For me, Andrea, what struck me was not so much the environment, but the people as a child and the people you were friend with, which shaped up your personality, made you see the differences. For Vincent and for me, they were like more like the environment, as you were saying, and for you, it was really the people that makes it probably more impactful than dealing with people. At the end of the day, you deal with people, of course, not with an environment or with a culture, with a whatever, or the country, but with people. So within your own culture, you deal with people. That's really that strikes me. Yeah. And for Vincent, for Vince, indeed, you see that and that the same cultural, in a way, in the UK where he grew up, and that it was not a question of another culture, but another culture in the sense of another maybe class, another society segment, and that's also very, of course, very interesting and very impactful and inspiring that you can also have that, not only in a different culture, but just in your own culture, of course. And there are also many differences within all different subcultures, so to say. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that would be my
Yeah, I
comment here.
did mention beans, but yeah, it is actually one of the notions that we mentioned is socioeconomic status, even inside the same culture, the context, even we believe we are the same because we belong to the same culture, apparently, but that there are
Yeah,
many differences.
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let's move on if you agree with the third round, also related to these intercultural competencies. Um, so describe someone you know personally who gets along well with others, especially people who are different from this person. What qualities or behaviors help this person connect with others? What do you think? Vincent, if you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough question because I know many people like that, of course, from our our peers, our professional circles, colleagues, friends, peers. But I think thinking of that, I will take my own daughter, Melina, who has been raised bilingually and biculturally. Her mother, my wife, is Dutch, and so our daughter speaks French and Dutch, Dutch and French in that order. And I think she developed as a bilingual, bicultural kid living in a rather open, liberal society and grabbing the chances she was given. She's now a child psychologist, and I think also professionally and personally, she shows how to adapt to different contexts, different cultural, intercultural contexts, developing intercultural competences, being aware of that certainly from her birth onwards. So I think she's an example of that, and the qualities, yeah, certainly. Flexibility, open-mindedness. I think something you can expect from someone growing bilingually in a intercultural environment somehow. That's certainly this, yeah, tolerance for others, also from her profession as a child psychologist, certainly that helps to dive into people's personalities and see care and cure as much as possible. So that behavior is then in a way the translation of that attitude clearly, and the quality she developed in this respect in connecting with others, professionally with her patients clearly, but also in general with her peers, friends, the families, and anyone around, basically. So I think this is among other known or less known peers that we all have, or personally, I think this is at this moment for me a good example of this person who gets along with others, based on what we were saying. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Very, very interesting. Okay, I will go to the other extreme somehow because when I was thinking about this kind of person, it's the first time I reflect on her. But I was thinking about my grandmother, who was called Aurelia. And I mentioned this when Vince interviewed me in the other podcast, in the other session, that I mentioned that my grandparents moved to the UK in the 60s. So I was thinking of how difficult it would have been for them. Um, Basically, they emigrated, as I mentioned, to from a small village to in Spain, in Andalusia, to London in the 60s. As you know, there was this dictatorship in Spain, so that was the reason. But she didn't speak the language. I mean, she came from a very similar family. She worked cleaning houses here in Spain and also in the UK. So, apparently she didn't receive trainings or lessons or whatever, not about the language, neither about the culture. And as you know, London in the 60s was already very, very diverse. I remember when she was alive, she told me stories about the Caribbean, Indian, Pakistan, people and from all around Europe. She was like so surprised by this diversity because in Spain, unfortunately the situation was very different at that time. Um, so on paper, she could have been like isolated. I mean, with my grandfather, but my grandfather was working the whole time, like 20 hours per day to get some money. But however, she became like one of the most connected, let's call it, people I've ever known. So her secret wasn't about grand gestures, it was more about like the quiet diplomacy, like she practiced in people's houses or homes. So on the one hand, I think she understood the universal language of care, and I could prove that when I was a child. But I think that was one of the most important things. Um, as I mentioned, her job was to clean houses, but she did it with a profound respect for the fact she was kind of someone's sanctuary or something like that. So she wasn't just like cleaning houses; she was looking after homes, after families. So the families she worked for example, one from Jamaica that I remember, a Jewish family as well, an Irish family. So she worked from also for very diverse, different kinds of families. Um, so basically, she would, for example, arrange children's toys with care instead of just, throwing them in a box. She was very polished, even without speaking English. She was like full of respect and all these kind of things for differences, different religions, different cultures, etc. So these small acts like silence or that nonverbal communication, I think that was one of her powers. And yeah, I mean, I think that's when I think of this kind of person, of course, I admire her so much. And also, when they were there, my mother and her sister, my auntie, were born. So that was also really complicated. They were to a school there, and they were learning English more than my grandparents. I mean, their children were speaking English and were growing up in that context and with that language. So I think it was very complex. I mean, to deal that house, with different ages, context, history behind, family, so yeah, basically, I think she was one of the people that told me that connection that is not related to a shared language or a shared culture, but
Yeah,
more with
yeah.
humanity, with dignity, with respect. You know, um, I always think of this powerful, maybe this may be some British, but this powerful cup of tea. It's, I think, very, very important, a very cultural concept as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, you have lived in the UK, you perfectly understand this. And yeah, and I wanted also to mention that she actually worked for Audrey Hepburn, from the actress, at her house in the 60s, when she wasn't that famous yet, and she lived in London. So, she told me these stories, and I was like really surprised. I mean, she could be like a good, very good cleaner, but especially a
Mhm.
very good person, keeping secrets, whatever happened in Audrey Hepburn's house and all these things. So, yeah, I think her story deserves to be told.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I comment the next prompt, let me just read what Vince was writing in the chat. My good friend mentor connects with everybody. He has worked in all of the world of dependency, addictions, gambling, drugs, alcohol, and the difficulties that create within families. He always meets people where they are at, not where he'd like them to be. Never judgmental, but always looking to acknowledge the past and move forward. If I comment on that right away, I think this is again a beautiful example of a of someone who is the mentor, a role model, and who doesn't need to be from another culture, as we like to be in our intercultural field, but someone just close to you with a very inspiring role and showing all those qualities again here, not judgmental, tolerance, open-mindedness, flexibility, strong personality to be able to work in these circles. So I think this is certainly someone you can admire as a in a way same culture, so to say, as you. If you speak on national culture, that's a good example. If I comment now to you as well, Andrea, what I'm speaking now. um, yeah, I like this again. You also through the generation. For you, it's ascending. For me, it was descending. But still, the family link is very strong, clearly. And I think we have role models certainly for you. This the grandmother. We had the chance to experience her in life, to live with her. So that's certainly a great example. And I think this, gives us inspiration. Certainly, very often in the ascending line, someone from grandparents. I like those stories. Certainly, I didn't have the chance to know my grandparents much, so I cannot. But that's why I went to the descending line. My daughter, up to you, over to you.
Thank you, Vincent. Yeah, just quickly, because I know we are running out of time. I thought it would be more. I know myself. Anyway, but thank you so much for both these stories. I think the same works for both of the stories, which is flexibility. In both cases, I think that's the key, or one of the key aspects, and also for my grandmother. You need to be very flexible, even if you are born in a tiny place, in a tiny village or whatever. But as your daughter Vincent, to be a psychologist, you need, of course, to be really, really flexible and willing not to judge, which I think is one of the most difficult things psychologists and lawyers may found themselves. So, and also about Vince's story, I think that's flexibility is also key about this not being judgmental, which is the key, and also the most difficult thing, because just trying also to wrap up, when we listen to people's stories, it's really difficult not to compare their stories with our own story, with our own background, biases, etc. So that not being judgmental, that's listening without judgment, is the most difficult thing. And when we run these sessions with people, it's one of the most difficult thing they find, because it's kind. I also use a metaphor. I always use the metaphor of the cultural lenses that you must take off when you
Yeah,
listen. And of course, it's really, really difficult, especially in 45 minutes like today, or in 1 hour and a half in
yeah,
just one session, is really difficult. But we hope we have achieved to do so. I think as it has been really important, really interesting, because I mean we have been exploring this field of story circles, but we have never made a story circle together, Vincent, neither with Vince.
No.
So that's great. It has been also really interesting. And just to finish, we wanted to share as an example of one of these debriefing questions that we normally ask at the end. How did it feel to share and to listen? Describe in one sentence how this experience made you feel. And quickly, I'm going to answer to this. It wasn't planned, but listening also to myself, I thought like my story or my identity is kind of a mosaic of stories. From my grandmother, from my friend. So, and Vincent, you were also mentioning this relation with my personality nowadays, also with Beverly Hills as well. And if you want to mention something to wrap up, Vincent and Vince.
I can read what Vince was saying here. Most enjoyable. Thank you. Interesting insight. Yeah, he was Vince, due to connection problems, as we mentioned in the beginning, is in a way behind the scene, helping us, commenting on the chat. And I think this is, he sees that as from the distance, but still very, very involved, of course. So this enjoyable, for me was in a way a new experience, because although I'm experienced facilitator for the UNESCO Story Circles, especially on site. Clearly, there's a lot more impact, because you then have the 5 senses. You can also touch people. You can share a lot more feelings, and you have a stronger connection. Now here on site, online, it's a bit of a challenge, but I think it's very enjoyable, certainly to have that. And every circle, every story circle is always different, and this one today was in a way I think we improvised. We was playing some kind of a ping pong by returning the ball to each other. I like that very much, and I hope we can meet again soon and do things more on site in Story Circle. But I think it was a very interesting experience, a new experience, certainly. And I enjoyed that very much. Yeah, that's certainly what I will retain of this session. Yeah.
Me too. And finally, I just wanted to share also some large group reflections that you may also at the end of the session, if you have time. What did you learn about yourself through this experience that I already mentioned? How did you feel about story circles? And I just wanted to mention again, one of my favorite ones, which is this: I used to think, now I think, because when I do this with students or participants, etc., I always take notes. And I think one of the most repeated answer is, I used to think my story wasn't important. Now I think everyone's story matters. I really love that. I mean, they say that with different words, but at the end, it's that, every person's story matters. And now I think, as also Vincent mentioned at the very beginning, is maybe most important than ever to listen to each other, to open our minds, to be empathetic, So I just wanted to mention this as well. And if you want to mention something else before finishing the session, Vincent, regarding to this.
Yeah, I like this. I used to think, now I think. I think, I didn't change my mind completely, but now I now see again strongly that connection can be done in any way, as long as people are open for that. And this is an example of an open dialogue, and this story circle. And I think I hope that we demonstrated that to the people. And again, I think that it showed that how important it is to listen for understanding, and not only just to reply to things, but just have the person tell their stories, and then you react to that in a structured way. I think we hope we were showing this in our exchange today, and that's very important to to have those competencies, qualities, and hence also behavior in real life. And I think this, in a nutshell, I hope, was a nice demonstration of that. Yeah. And I think if we need to close now, I think I would like to thank the audience, the listeners, for this session. On behalf of Vince Stevenson, I'd like to thank you all. And due to some technical problems, he was the host of this session, but was not participating actively, but through the chat. I think I appreciate that very much as well. And it's always a pleasure to see Andrea again. That's for sure. And hoping to run a session sometime, with two of us or with others. Yeah. So thank you very much, all of you, the listeners, on behalf of Vince, on behalf of Andrea. And we hope to see you soon again in a new session run by Vince Stevenson. And hopefully you have a good day. Okay, over to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So much. Yes. Thank you again. I hope this was useful, and you already have our contact, so we are always open to answer questions, to facilitate trainings, etc. So have a wonderful day, and thank you again, both of you, and to the audience. Bye.
Adios. Bye-bye.